Welcome to Sinful Arts Fantasy Fridays. I'm your host, Cynthia, and this is The Hobbit. Yes, but that was long ago, said Golan. I was talking about you, and I assure you there is a mark on this door, the usual one in the trade, or used to be. Burglar wants a good job, plenty of excitement, and reasonable reward. That's how it usually read. You can say expert treasure hunter instead of burglar if you like. Some of them do. It's all the same to us. Gandalf told us there was a man of sorts in these parts looking for a job at once, and that he had arranged for a meeting here this Wednesday tea time. Of course there is a mark, said Gandalf. I put it there myself, for very good reasons. You asked me to find the 14th man for your expedition, and I chose Mr. Baggins. Just let anyone say I choose the wrong man or the wrong house, and you can stop at 13 and have all the bad luck you like, or go back to digging coal. He scowled so angrily at Golan that the dwarf huddled back in his chair, and when Bilbo tried to open his mouth to ask a question, he turned and frowned at him and stuck out his bushy eyebrows till Bilbo shut his mouth tight with a snap. That's right, said Gandalf. Let's have no more argument. I have chosen Mr. Baggins, and that ought to be enough for all of you. I say he is a burglar. A burglar he is, or will be, when the time comes. There is a lot more in him than you guess, and a deal more than he has any idea of himself. You may possibly all live thank me yet. Now, Bilbo, my boy, fetch the lamp, and let's have a little light on this. On the table, in the light of the big lamp, with a red shade, he had spread a piece of parchment, rather like a map. This was made by Thor, your grandfather, Thorin, he said in answer to the dwarves' excited questions. It is a plan of the mountain. I don't see that this will help us much, said Thorin, disappointedly after a glance. I remember the mountain well enough, and the lands about it, and I know where Mirkwood is, and the withered heath where the great dragons bred. This is a dragon marked in red on the mountain, said Balin, but it will be easy enough to find him without that, if we ever arrive there. There is one point that you haven't noticed, said the wizard, and that is the secret entrance. You see that rune on the west side, and the hand pointed to it from the other runes? That marks a hidden passage to the lower halls. It may have been a secret one, said Thorin, but how do we know that it's secret any longer? Old Smaug has lived there long enough now to find out anything there is to know about those caves. He may, but he can't have used it for years and years. Why? Because it's too small. 5 feet high the door, and 3 may walk abreast, said the runes, but Smaug could not creep into a hole that size, not even when he was a young dragon, certainly not after devouring so many dwarves and men of Dale. It seems to be a big hole to me, squeaked Bilbo, who had no experience of dragons and only of hobbit holes. He was getting excited and interested again, so that he forgot to keep his mouth shut. He loved maps, and in his hall there hung a large one of the country round, with all his favorite walks marked on it in red ink. How could such a large door be kept secret from everybody outside, apart from the dragon, he asked. He was only a little hobbit, you must remember. In a lot of ways, said Gandalf, but in what way this one has been hidden we do not know, without going to see. From what it says on the map, I should guess there is a closed door which has been made to look exactly like the side of a mountain. That is the usual dwarves' method. I think that is right, isn't it? Quite right, said Thorin. Also, went on Gandalf, I forgot to mention that with the map went a key, a small curious key. Here it is, he said, and handed it to Thorin, a key with a long barrel and intricate wards made of silver. Keep it safe. Indeed I will, said Thorin, and he fastened it upon his fine chain that hung about his neck and under his jacket. Now things will begin to look more hopeful. This news altered them much for the better. So far we had no clear idea what to do. We thought of going east, as quiet and careful as we could, as far as the long lake. After that the trouble would begin. A long time before that, if I know anything about the roads of east, interrupted Gandalf. We might go from there up along the river running, went on Thorin, taking no notice, and so to the ruins of Dale, the old town in the valley there, under the shadow of the mountain. But we none of us like the idea of the front gate. The river runs right out of it through the great cliff at the south of the mountain, and out of it comes the dragon too, far too often unless he is changed. That would be no good, said the wizard. Not without mighty warrior, even a hero. I tried to find one, but warriors are busy fighting one another in distant lands, and in this neighborhood heroes are scarce, or simply not to be found. Swords in these parts are mostly blunt, and axes used for trees, and shields as cradles or dish covers, and dragons are comfortably far off, and therefore legendary. That is why I settled on burglary, especially when I remembered the existence of a side door. And here is our little Bilbo Baggins, the burglar, the chosen and selected burglar. Now let's get on and make some plans. Very well, then, said Thorin. Supposing the burglar expert gives us some ideas or suggestions, he turned with his mock politeness to Bilbo. First, I should like to know a bit more about things, he said, feeling all confused and a bit shaky inside, but so far still tookishly determined to go on with things. I meant about the gold and the dragons and all of that, and how it got there, and who it belonged to, and so on and further. Bless me, said Thorin. Haven't you got a map? Didn't you hear our song? Haven't we been talking about this for hours? All the same, I should like it all plain and clear, he said obstinately, putting on his business manner, usually reserved for people who tried to borrow money off of him, and doing his best to appear wise and prudent and professional and live up to Gandalf's recommendation. Also, I should like to know about risks, out-of-pocket expenses, time required, remuneration, and so forth, by which he meant, what am I going to get out of it, and am I going to come back alive? Oh, very well, said Thorin. Long ago, in my grandfather Thor's time, and our family was driven out of the far north and came back with all their wealth and their tools to this mountain on the map. It had been discovered by my far ancestor Thrain the Old, but now they mined and they tunneled and they made hunger halls and greater workshops, and in addition I believe they found a good deal of gold and great many of jewels too. Anyway, they grew immensely rich and famous, and my grandfather was king under the mountain again, and treated with great reverence by the immortal men who lived to the south, and were gradually spreading up by the running river as far as the valley foreshadowed by the mountain. They built the merry town of Dale there in those days. Kings used to send for our smiths, and reward even the least skillful most richly. Fathers would beg us to take their sons as apprentices and pay us handsomely, especially in food supplies, which we never bothered to grow or find for ourselves. Altogether, those were good days for us, and the poorest of us had money to spend and lend, and leisure to make beautiful things just for the fun of it, not to speak of the most marvelous and magical toys, the likes of which is not to be found in the world nowadays. So my grandfather's halls became full of armor and jewels and carvings and cups, and the toy market of Dale was the wonder of the north. Undoubtedly, that's what brought the dragon. Dragons steal gold and jewels, and from men and elves and dwarves, wherever they can find them, and they guard and plunder as long as they live, which is practically forever unless they are killed, and never enjoy a brass ring of it. Thank you for joining me in this week's episode of The Hobbit. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any episodes, and smash that like button. And if you would like to show your support, please go check out Cynfullarts.ca. Or if you'd rather make a donation, go check out my Ko-fi page. Remember, if you have a story you would like me to read, send it to info@cynfullarts.ca. Thank you for joining me in this week's episode. I hope you will join me next week.